Natia, what did I draw?
Georgian esoteric writer Givi Alaznis'Pireli reminds us that according to the cosmogonic knowledge of the ancient period, the universe is a sphere. The sun moves along its outer layer, while the Earth is in the center of the universe. Mr. Pireli expressed the opinion stating that this macro model of cosmic space is the main matrix of the hydrogen atom's structure. The author of this concept suggests the second version, based on ancient dogmas, since the universe has lines of force with two poles. One is the visible sun, and the second, the esoteric sun, hidden inside the Earth. Hydrogen atoms should also have micro lines of force with two poles. He claims that this is due to the fact that the electrons of atoms never lose their distance from protons. According to the third version of Givi Alaznis'Pireli, since physicists assume that on the scale of the hydrogen atom something is happening which still remains incomprehensible to specialists, something similar may occur in the universe. This will be the entry of superradiance from space to Earth in particular, in the territory of the Republic of Georgia.
According to the Bible, the time will come, and the authors of antiquity meant our period, when all will go against all. I ask you, did they lie? Have we been deceived? Isn't that so? Don't you see that everything is pretty bad now? Today, not only poor countries are spiritually and morally unhealthy, but nature has hit rich countries too. And the society there is also in a mess. They themselves guess that something is wrong. We, representatives of poor countries, also guess that something is happening around us and some kind of invisible trouble is tormenting us. But what? What exactly is happening? I will start with this topic and will try to further develop it. So here's how it goes. According to the knowledge of the ancient sages, there is a radiance inside the earth, which is located behind that dark tunnel where souls go during clinical death. This is also the sun. That's why it was called Ramze, i.e. Ra Sun. You do not know our local poem, but we, Georgians, remember it from childhood. The sun inside and the sun outside. I am talking about the inner sun. According to the teachings of the ancient sages, the inner sun is gradually decreasing in size. When I learned that the hidden sun is diminishing, I felt obliged to give up my life and basic occupations, and I gave up music. I haven't played a piano for 30 years. I started with a typewriter. Later, a friend of mine lent me an old computer. Having saved up some money, I bought myself a used computer and I could still hardly work. I could do nothing but put aside my personal life, as I found the reason why the very being and morality of mankind are getting worse, and its greed keeps growing. The government, as well as the ruling parties, have lost control of the common people. They have forgotten us, and there is a competition going on between them to see who will become the most famous billionaire. In my opinion, none of them fully understands what their veracity will lead to. What will I lose? What will ordinary citizens lose? They will lose everything. What did they do it all for? They aren't multi-millionaires. They're already multi-billionaires. We also have oligarchs in Georgia, but they didn't even think of inviting me. What's the problem? If they're ordinary people, I am also a mere mortal. They can come and ask me, Mr. Pireli or dear Givi, how can we help you? But on the contrary, I have applied to them numerous times asking for funding. How many times I have asked and asked? But no one hears me nor pays attention. How many times should I apply for a grant? It's as if I'm not here. Well, okay. So it turned out that inside the Earth, this radiance is gradually decreasing. How to prove it? It turns out that this radiance, located in the depths of the Earth, called Ramze, is the cause of the lines of force of the universe. Thus, this light has thrown out its rays from inside the Earth to a very great distance and gathered somewhere just as they are, curled up deep inside the Earth. Do you understand? You have to imagine it. Why is it hot there? Or why other lines of force, distributed in different directions, are not visible? There are a lot of lines of force near the visible sun being located close to each other. Therefore, they maintain a relatively more active phase in that area than the lines of force scattered throughout the universe. And the other end of those lines of force is stored here, inside the Earth. Thus, one sun is the gathering place of the lines of force, while the other one is here, below. This area, where the lines of force are gathered inside the Earth, the Sumerians called the umbilical cord of the universe. Well, they considered it so. This all is happening under the Caucasus, and the entrance was found in the Republic of Georgia, in the Imereti region, near the village of Nunisi. That's why in the oldest Georgian Old Testament, the word whale is repeatedly mentioned. By the way, when reading the version of the Georgian Bible, I was really surprised and searched for the answer to what that whale was. According to some mythologies, it is a turtle, and in some countries it was known as an elephant. But no, here we deal with a whale. From time immemorial, we, Georgians, are talking about a stone whale. Since childhood, we have heard about the concept of gvel veshapi, serpent whale, and in other languages, it is a dragon. I would say more. In ancient scriptures, it is said that as long as the dragon is alive, as long as the serpent whale tempts the population, people cannot be happy. I grew up. Once, when I was a teenager, my parents and I entered a church. There was an icon there. I saw a hero with a beautiful face. He's piercing something with his spear, either a dinosaur or a brontosaurus. I looked at my parents and asked, Mum, Dad, what is it? They explained that this rider is Saint George. They said that until he comes and pierces the serpent whale, nothing is going to save humanity. The knowledge of my parents' generation ended there. The fact that Saint George would come and kill the dragon. First, where is this Saint George? Let's say he has come. He is here. We've seen him recently on a trolley bus. How can we recognize him when today absolute unbelief reigns everywhere? If he'll name himself Saint George, any theologian and unbeliever have the right to open the Bible and read it to him. Come on here, you so-called Saint George. This is what is written here. The one who will say, I am him, is not him. Can you imagine? This is a vicious circle. He has no right to say, this is me. By the way, it is a test. Natia, you can check it out. Let's say one of your friends or acquaintances claims that he's Jesus, or Moses, or John, or whoever. Just ask him if he really is John. If he agrees, saying, yes, it's me, then it's not him. This is where we are stuck. Well, St. George should come and kill the dragon, which in the ancient Georgian language was called serpent whale. That is the dragon. Do we know what a dragon is? And since he himself will kill him, it means that he knows what a serpent whale is. And here is what we are dealing with. In the center of the Republic of Georgia, in Imereti, a very large spiral tunnel goes deep into the ground with a whale on top. What goes on inside this stone system defines whether or not it will properly conduct the field. What field are we talking about? Thus, the universe is a sphere. In its center there is a dipole, the Sumerian Dimgal, i.e. the axis of the universe, and is projected on the territory of our Georgia. The dipole of the universe is a conscious field. If, upon contact of this field with the Earth, it meets a healthy situation, it will pass and circulate without problems. By the way, volunteers. Natia, 1 minute, please. Enrollees, I would like to appeal to you, who decided to study physics. There the knowledge has been divided. Some will tell you that an electromagnetic field is static, but don't believe it. The field is considered static when it is not electromagnetic, and when it is only an electric field with one pole, only itself. As soon as this energy is divided, for example, we have the energy of 50 joules. This energy is divided. We have 25 here and 25 there, i.e. the second pole has been formed. This field will begin to circulate. If the circulation of this field stops, there will be no second pole. So if you somehow close that pole, the lines of force will go back, connect, and you will have one pole of 50 joules of energy again. At that moment, it experiences isolation. In fact, it is limited and hidden in itself. It is screened.
Why?
Perhaps one of you would wish to ask me whether Ramsey inside the Earth is decreasing. By the way, I wanted to find an answer to this question too, as in recent years I have often met with physicists. I spoke at the Georgian Academy of Sciences, in lecture halls of various research institutes, and I wanted to be ready for this. I was frequently asked how I could prove that the radiance under the ground of the Caucasus is gradually decreasing. I have no right to flip through mythological books in front of them and tell them, look what the Egyptians said about it and what is written here. The ancient Egyptians literally wrote so. They used to address that serpent this way.
The Egyptians cursed the cosmic serpent Apophis. Turn back, you cursed one. Get back into the netherworld where your father ordered you to be. Don't you dare approach the sacred place where the god Amon-Ra is.
This is the second notable fact proving that there is a sacred place somewhere that the Egyptians used to know about. Now it's the 21st century. Do we know about it? Not only the representatives of modern physics and astronomy have no idea about it, but actually no one knows, even at the level of assumption, that such a thing really exists, and it exists here in Georgia. Since the dipole of the universe descends on the territory of Georgia, even unnecessary noise is unacceptable at that place. At the same time, today our life is in chaos. The Earth's field used to be called Gveli in Georgian, that is, the serpent. The letter G, Geo, means earth, plus Veli, the field. Thus, the earthly field was called G field. This is an earthly dark field, i.e. the serpent surrounds the dipole of the universe, narrowing it, which in its turn causes the decrease in the shining Ramsey inside the earth. The Sumerians also knew about this, and then I will show you what warning they left to humanity. Besides, as a result, the worst has eventually happened. Inside the Earth, in its virtual core, there is a virtual radiance. I called it virtual light, though this light, called Ra, really exists. Since the existence and health of the external sun depends on it, it turned out that the external sun is gradually also decreasing in size. When I figured it out at first, I got confused. As I've told you, such a fact was needed. Once, When I was watching TV, in some documentary film, I heard this phrase from astrophysicists saying, "It is already established fact that the sun is shrinking." Now, let's suppose that somewhere on a train I meet an astronomer and ask, "Is it true that the sun is gradually shrinking?" He will agree. I will ask the second question, "Do you know why it is decreasing in size?" He will tell me everything except for the reason why the external sun is really shrinking. But actually the sun decreases only because the sun hidden inside the earth is decreasing. That is, the visible sun depends on the inner one. You were poisoned by a gas leak at night?
Yes.
You don't remember anything?
No.
At that moment, you were very quickly passing through the tunnel.
I didn't run in the usual way, but I was sliding horizontally and suddenly got to my feet at the edge of the tunnel, from where I could see that field. It was there before my eyes.
What do you think? Is that tunnel in the sky?
It's not in heaven, neither on earth. It was 1.5 meters above the ground.
Did you fly in the sky or inside the earth?
Inside the earth, not in the sky.
And how did that light happen to be inside the earth?
That light was... How can I tell you? There was no sunlight. You've seen a ripe apricot, haven't you? I will compare that light with this color.
It was not the sunlight, which we know.
No, it wasn't like the sun would shine. Gia, do you know what it looked like? When it is cloudy in the summer during the day, with a little rain. At the same time, it is somehow clear in a different way. It was the weather like this.
Aunt Lida, 1 minute, please. Irakli. All three of us are from the eastern part of Georgia, from the village of Velitsikhe. You may remember what Aunt Lida just said. I have loved it since childhood. In summer, when it is too hot outside and it suddenly becomes cloudy with a little rain, the air smells wet. She compares this with the smell of a place that she saw in the underworld. Now, I understand why I love that period when it becomes cloudy in summer and a wet smell fills the place.
Do you know how good it was? But here is what I'm interested in. There were many flowering shrubs, but none of them had a single flower. There was a stone tile laid and flowers were placed in the corner. I told myself, why do they collect them? Let these beautiful flowers remain on the bushes.
Aunt Lida, perhaps it was a dream.
Such a long dream? No.
Good answer. Ingenious. Sure. You saw your late father there.
Yes.
How did you recognize him?
From the back, by his grey hair and the cap that is worn in Tusheti, in one of the mountainous regions of our Georgia. It really was my father.
When a person is in a state of clinical death, the dead relatives and friends sometimes tell him that it's not yet time for them to come there. Did your father, i.e. my grandfather, ask why you had come, and that it was still too early for you to come there?
No, as I told you, first he looked around as if he was looking for something. Then he took a large branch of a tree, turned around, and when I thought he would come up and help me so that I could jump over, he threw this dry branch at me. I stepped back to dodge the branch, not to be hit by it.
Back in the 70s of the last century, when this happened and you told us, your relatives, about it for the first time, you remembered that after you were in the thickets of wheat, you suddenly found yourself in a very long hallway.
I wouldn't say that the hallway was beautiful and well decorated. It was a hallway leading to an exit, which I can still see before me. I did leave that hallway from where I looked at that tunnel, but I had to go back. I didn't go back that way. I went up the stairs.
Where can this hallway be located? Was it tiled? What does it look like?
It was made of brick or stone, I couldn't see, but anyway, it was not very polished and beautiful.
There was a long shelf with books there.
Yes, there was a shelf with books on either side.
What kind of books do you think they were?
I don't know. They weren't very thick books. But my attention was drawn to the fact that these books weren't just scattered around, but had been beautifully arranged.
You say that there were shelves with books in that long hallway. Irakli's son, Givi also talked about it. He said he got somewhere in the hallway, and there were shelves with books. Such a coincidence? I've been thinking for years about what might be in that hallway. And you know where I got to in my thoughts? In my humble opinion, that is the library of the prophet David. This library has been sought after for millennia, but it is hidden at a very high level. In fact, it is lost. I do not exclude the fact that this library may be there, at the epicenter of the descent of the pillar of the universe. Do you understand? Here's what interests me now. You've been in the underworld of the earth, and you know more than we do. Suppose you wanted to pick those wheat germs. Would you be able to?
No, they wouldn't let me pull them out. They took great care of them.
I know. Yes, I know all of this. When you spiritually flew in that tunnel, did you move horizontally or descend upright into the depths?
No, horizontally. It felt as if I was moving in a supine position.
And at what speed could you move there?
The speed was very high. At first, it was dark. There was no light, but still, I could see well enough to move on.
You say it was not sunshine. So what was shining there?
No, it wasn't the sun. It was a very beautiful color. As I mentioned to you before, it was the color of a ripe apricot. It didn't dazzle the eyes. When you look at the sun, your eyes water at the brightness, but it was not that kind of a light.
I don't want you to get too tired, so this time it's enough. I will definitely get back to this topic. Now I will move on to physics, but don't get confused. I can easily explain it in simple language. The long black tunnel is actually located inside the Earth, while behind the tunnel, as living witnesses tell us, the other world begins. Let no physicist argue with me that the speed of light in the underworld is 300,000 kilometers per second. This speed belongs to modern light, when the whole of nature and the inhabitants of the earth are tired. This might make physicists smile, but based on the environment in which our spherical universe, the Earth, where all humans are located, because of this tiring situation, I found a new term for a photon of light and called it a tired photon. Conversations on this issue are gradually evolving. It turns out that the further we go back in time, the more light will be active and the speed of light will increase. Natia, you may not know this, but I am studying physics and have an idea of what is happening today. In fact, physicists have reached chaos. They talk about it. However, so far they talk about it with a smile, I would say, evasively. We, the guests of physics, also observe their knowledge. They have done a great job. I wouldn't say bad things about physics. Actually, this is an industry that, in fact, how to say? On my way to you, I was standing on the subway escalator, and the stairs were moving by themselves. Can you imagine? Where was it in the past? Who invented all this? Not to mention airplanes, spaceflight, and here is the internet. We have it in our homes, and we can observe humanity in seconds. This is one of the topical questions about why I was forced to postpone my life and started working on this topic. This is what it concerns. Since physicists have left information letting us know that at some point an electron must fall into the nucleus, and thus the hydrogen atom will cease to exist. But actually, it must not fall in the nucleus, right? Later I decided that maybe, with the help of some textbooks, I could somehow manage to understand that it should not fall. But still, something is happening there. What is going on inside an atom between an electron and a nucleus? And I came to the following conclusion. Since something is going on in the atom, but physicists don't yet really know what exactly is happening there, the same should happen in the universe. Because if hydrogen atoms do not have this code written in the main matrix, i.e. in the universe, they won't figure out what is to be done. Therefore, they step by step repeat what is going to happen in the universe in the future. In those years, I already boldly allowed myself to publish this in the Georgian press. It was somewhere in the late 90s, or probably in the 2000s. Later, I voiced this idea on a television show, warning that the tension between the two suns was growing. As a result, both of them have impaired their proper functioning and normal condition. Here's what's going on below. Everything's gone crazy. There is a war going on there. Hydrogen sulfide and the radiance of Ramsey collided with each other. And as I've pointed out before, this is the reason for so many strong earthquakes. But at the same time, abnormal processes began in the outer sun too. What's the matter? Well, let's say we'll somehow stand the earthquakes. Let there be flashes in the outer sun too. But what are we waiting for? How long can this all last? Thus, according to Maxwell's electrodynamics and Isaac Newton's laws, the electron must fall into the nucleus. But how can it fall? On the contrary, it must move away from it and be lost in space. Actually, it turns out that there are lines of force between them and the voltage between them is growing. Therefore, when the nucleus of an atom keeps aging, it also accumulates the hydrogen sulfide inside in a very small amount. It turns out that the ability of the atom's radiation depends on this microluminous phenomenon, which is inside the nucleus of the atom, and it shines. So that radiance is also at an impasse and is slowly shrinking. And before there is a discharge between an electron and a proton, or when the situation between them becomes increasingly tense, the proton is forced and tries to somehow cut through the amount of hydrogen sulfide accumulated around it, using its own microdipole to somehow keep contact with the electron. And when this process begins inside an atom, the quanta fall out of its proton. What is going on in this regard on a large scale, i.e., what is going to happen in the universe? Well, in the universe, exactly the same thing will happen as that which happens in aging atoms. Consequently, atoms experience something that has not yet happened in the universe, but this will inevitably happen. Atoms are pre-affected by time. Do you understand me? Today, tensions grow in the Republic of Georgia. This causes the deterioration and collapse of any sphere in our Georgia. Even more, those are artificial collapses. If humanity does not immediately turn to us, then it will be too late to act. I would ask you to immediately organize an international symposium in Tbilisi. I would make a speech there and explain to everyone that the death of the Republic of Georgia will lead to the death of humanity. Well, you don't believe me? Please, look what the Sumerians bequeathed us.
In Sumerian mythology, a cosmic tree is described. The death of which is the epic of the era is recognized as tantamount to a universal catastrophe, a violation of the order established in heaven and earth.
The ancestors wrote something to us that the so-called second coming of the overshine is to take place. First, we do not know what overshine is, or where it will come from our left or from the right or from above. We do not know that either. Moreover, we have subconscious expectations in front of us. Today, everyone is waiting for something. The people from both rich and poor countries. The same is with my friends, acquaintances, neighbors. They stop me in the streets and say, "Givi, we have a feeling that something is about to happen." Of course, it must happen. And it turns out that we are waiting for the following. There must be a discharge between the two suns. This is the subject of our expectations. Here's what lies before us. There is another problem. Here's what I have written. According to the Bible, in our time, someone must blow a trumpet and a sham. Let's ask theologians what trumpet or sham are. The ancients did not know our terminology, for example, magnetic lines and many more. After all, there was no word for television back then. To be more precise, they did know that in our time there will be some kind of box in the form of a modern TV, but they could not explain it. It turned out that sham and trumpet mean modern mass media, television, radio. Can you imagine? And today, when movies related to religion are being made, someone holds something twisted in his hand, blows it, and produces sounds like... That's how far the religious worldview has fallen. Natia, the conclusion is as follows, if I haven't tired you out too much yet. There is no fall of electrons into protons. but a discharge occurs between them. No other way. This is 100% so. And if physicists have not comprehended this for many reasons, I cannot say anything more. This is their problem. I did what a person of my age could do, and besides my books, I somehow managed to create this documentary film.
Mr. Pireli, it shouldn't be done this way. Several years ago, you promised on TV that on December 21st, 2012, a strong beam would enter the mountains of our Georgia from cosmic space, but nothing happened.
This is not my fault. A group of astronomers made this mistake. They have previously published versions on the internet in the form of documentaries. Those were popular scientific documentaries saying that on December the 21st, 2012, an absolute parade of all planets was expected. This still can be found on the internet. Enter the search field, Great Parade of the Planets 2012, December 21, and you will see it. If all the planets would really line up in one row, then the ray that I promised on TV would certainly have entered Georgia. But since the ray did not come, well, please do not blame me for that. I merely trusted them. I would not trust the internet and computer versions of what was expected to happen on December the 21st, 2012. But I can show you one of the news program's excerpts. This information was broadcast by one of the Russian TV channels, even before that, in 2011. Please listen carefully.
Удивительное космическое представление происходит сейчас на небе. Астрономы, профессионалы и любители готовятся к главному планетарному шоу – Большому параду планет 21 декабря 2012 года. Уже сейчас небесные тела Солнечной системы выстраиваются в линию. Надежда Силина задалась вопросом, к чему приведет предстоящий парад.
Она королева красоты на ночном небосклоне. Почти 2 месяца вокруг нее танцевал могучий Юпитер. Венера – самая яркая звезда на небе. И этой весной наблюдать, как планеты готовятся к большому параду, особенно интересно. Этому событию СМИ придали мистический характер. Расшифровка письмен Майя дала почву для буйства фантазий в интернете и на большом экране. Явление на самом деле не столь редкое. Малые наблюдают через год. Большие, конечно, происходят реже. И тот, что будет в декабре, безусловно, интересен. Сразу 6 планет Солнечной системы выстроятся в ряд. Как раз перемещение Юпитера и Меркурия по отношению к Луне и Венере любители могли видеть невооруженным глазом. Но фаталисты уверенно заявляют, что вместе с парадом планет в Солнечной системе выстроятся на одну галактическую ось и другие звезды.
Do you see? If one of the top-rated Russian TV channels officially announced this to us, how could I double-check it? How could I say that this should not be expected, especially since this issue had caused a great stir in the world at that time? However, when I was invited to the TV studio to participate in the 100 Degrees program, I brought about 50 different photos to Nodar Meladze, the host of that project. I was going to explain to the viewers under what circumstances the strong beam would enter Georgia and under what circumstances it would not. But I was simply not allowed to discuss it. At the end of one of the filming sections in the studio, they took the microphone from me and drove me out. In fact, I was expelled from this TV show. This material was aired in December 2011. At the same time, such a topic was discussed, a global issue. In December 2012, they assumed this. I told them that I have been studying this subject for decades and expected something to happen between the two suns. I was speaking of two suns. Astronomers in the same studio were laughing and giggling ironically. The staff of this program took the microphone from me and went on with the discussions about modern computer technologies. First of all, can anybody explain to me how such a violation of the TV show style may be possible, the project included this topic, didn't it? What did computer civilization have to do with that TV program? And they sent me home. Then it was as if nature itself laughed at me. At the end of 2011, when this show was recorded on Imedi TV channel, I suddenly discovered on the internet the work of one of the largest corporations in US space exploration. It clearly showed how all the planets rotate together in space, which I'm going to show you later. You have to enter the date, year, month, day, and see what was going to happen to our so-called solar system in that period of time. I mean on December the 21st, 2012. I came across it just 2 weeks later. I wanted to immediately call back to Mr. Nodar Meladze, the host of the show, and ask him to invite me back if he was going to make a program on the same topic in the near future. By that time, he himself called me and asked if I would like to take part in a program on this topic again. Of course, I agreed, and said that I had some good information. I'll come and clarify under which circumstances a cosmic ray would enter our Georgia, or how it wouldn't. We kind of agreed. I prepared and was waiting for the call, but no one called me. Can you imagine? If only I had seen that mechanism created by an American corporation 2 weeks earlier. This is an animation, partially self-operating software that shows what states the planets will be in at one time or another. If I had seen this mechanism even 3 weeks earlier, I would have written down December the 21st, 2012 in it and rechecked it. Please, take a look. This is what they promised us, and how the planets were actually lined up. Therefore, no parade of planets was expected then. I did not know. In spite of everything, I apologize to our audience. So this is how December the 21st, 2012 passed. But nothing happened in space. Although in that TV show I promised the audience that it would. Subconsciously, we remember that this is going to happen. I have read in the Old Testament that those who can predict it and think a lot about it will survive. Why shouldn't I tell you that all this is expected on the territory of the Republic of Georgia? I will try to draw a conclusion from one quote. I always ask people not to believe me. Let's believe the Almighty, what He told one of the prophets. This is an excerpt from the Old Testament, Isaiah 2:2. When this happens, as I have already said and shown you on the screen, it will be in the last days. The mountain of the house of the Lord will be placed at the head of the mountains, and all nations will flow to it. The new year is ahead of us, and I may take away the festive mood of our population. So my question to everyone is, if a global thing is expected in the days before the next new year, will tourists come to our Georgia? If the fact that all the planets line up in one row is justified, then a ray would come from space and would have to dissect 2 mountains on the territory of our Georgia. That's all.
And is this predicted in the Bible?
I have been talking about this from an early age. You also know about it. You have read a lot of my stuff. First, I published it in the Georgian press, then in Russia, and later in the Russian language media in the United States. I have printed this even in Turkey. Which other nation should I mention? I go here and there so that somehow... But who remembers me? Aunt Lida, when you were there, did you remember that you were in the area of the dead?
No. I had no idea.
And when you saw your late father alive, were you not surprised?
I didn't realize that he was dead at that moment. I was happy to see him alive. I had the feeling as if I had come to the village and seen him there.
How long did you stay in that tunnel?
There was one slip.
When sliding on, did you feel any fear?
No, fear gripped me when I saw the light and didn't know where I would fall. But I suddenly got up. Then I was flying horizontally in the air. I didn't walk on the floor or on the ground.
In your opinion, what was it? An illusion? A phenomenon of appearance? Or did you just move to another real world?
I can't say for sure, but it was very beautiful. I can't forget that swaying field. Once my father took me to a place where he sowed wheat. It was of that height and even higher. And these fields didn't at all differ from each other. It was very good there. People there were neatly dressed. It wasn't that they weren't communicating with each other. They were divided into groups and were talking. From above, I couldn't hear what they were saying. I didn't go down.
What do the souls leaving the body see during the period of clinical death? What do you think it is? Is it a fictional story, a fairy tale, or reality?
This is not a fairy tale or a dream. I can't say what it is.
But this is reality.
Yes, this is reality.
Do you think, or are you sure that you really saw it?
I think I really saw it. I haven't forgotten this story for so many years. You can have a dream and later it will disappear, and you won't be able to restore it in your memory. Do you remember what dream you had last year? You don't. How many years have passed since then, and I haven't forgotten about it. I cannot go to sleep without remembering that tunnel, not in a bad but good way.
And still, what would you compare that heavenly radiance with? What does it look like?
I'll try to tell you. I kind of drew a such parallel. You know the rainbow? It has different colors. There is one color of apricot. Yes, I just keep on mentioning apricot. That color isn't very bright, Gia, but it's attractive. I can't say that I had a bad experience there. I liked what I saw. Calmness, serenity. Young girls and boys were separated, and the old people were having fun separately. But I was looking at them from above. I could not go down.
Out of those who were there, did you see anyone with an angry face?
No, I wasn't that close to them. I guess everyone there was getting along well together. Really. There was such a serenity there that it was impossible for them to even think about something bad. It was very quiet there.
Many people I interview tell me that when they found themselves in that pleasant environment, no one wants to leave it. You, personally, did you want to return to this world again?
Hard to tell. I didn't feel like I would return here or stay there, but I know for sure that I didn't go to my father. I couldn't jump. I stayed in the tunnel, at the edge of the tunnel.
Since then, have you had any wish to return there?
No.
Aunt Lida, this is not a complete answer. After that, have you had any wish to return there?
If I saw all this in a dream, it was such a nice dream that even if I hadn't woken up, it would have been okay.